Hello, I'm Reverend Scott Wipperman, pastor here at First Presbyterian Church in Helena, Montana, and we welcome you to our worship service today. I'd like you to know that regardless of who you are or where you are in your journey of faith, you're welcome here at First Presbyterian Church.
And our New Testament reading comes from Luke. It's a story you might have heard just once or twice before. Let's see if you recognize it. But try to hear it with new ears. Now the tax collectors and sinners were all gathering around to hear Jesus. But the Pharisees and the teachers of the law muttered, "This man welcomes sinners and eats with them." Then Jesus told them this parable. There was a man who had 2 sons. The younger one said to his father, "Father, give me my share of the estate." So he divided his property between them. Not long after that, the younger son got together all he had and set off for a distant country, and there squandered his wealth in a wild living. And after he had spent everything, there was a severe famine in the whole country, and he began to be in need. So he went and he hired himself out to a citizen of that country, who sent him to his father's fields to feed the pigs. He longed to fill his stomach with the pods of the pigs were eating, but no one gave him anything. When he came to his senses, he said, "How many of my father's hired servants have food to spare? And here I am starving to death. I will set out and go back to my father and say to him, 'Father, I have sinned against you. I have sinned against heaven and you. I'm no longer worthy to be called your son. Make me like one of your hired slaves.' So he got up and he went to his father. But while he was still a long way off, his father saw him and was filled with compassion for him. He ran to his son and threw his arms around him and kissed him. The son said to him, 'Father, I have sinned against heaven and against you. I'm no longer worthy to be called your son.' But the father said to the servants, 'Quick, bring the best robe and put it on him. Put a ring on his finger and sandals on his feet. Bring the fatted calf and kill it. Let's have a feast and celebrate. For this son of mine was dead and is alive again. He was lost and is found.' So they began to celebrate. Meanwhile, the older son was in the field. When he came near the house, he heard the music and dancing. So he called to one of the servants and asked him what was going on. 'Your brother has come,' he replied, 'and your father has killed the fatted calf because he has him back safe and sound.' The older brother became angry and refused to go in. So his father went out and pleaded with him. But he answered his father, 'Look, all these years I've been slaving for you and never disobeyed your orders. Yet you never gave me even a young goat so I could celebrate with my friends. But when this son of yours, who has squandered your property with prostitutes, comes home, you kill the fatted calf for him.' 'My son,' the father said, 'you are always with me, and everything I have is yours. But we had to celebrate and be glad, because this brother of yours was dead and is alive again. He was lost and now is found.'" The word of the Lord. Well, once I lost something. Maybe it's happened to you too. And there was a break in the space-time continuum, because at one moment I knew where something was, and then suddenly in the next moment I didn't know where it was. There is this break that occurs sometimes in things like this. And in Joshua, the people think that they have just gone through one of these breaks. They've been wandering around in the desert for 40 years. And they've just recently crossed the Jordan River into the promised land, into the land that they were promised by their forefathers, to their forefathers. And they have, shortly after they get there, the first Passover feast they've had in 39 years. The last one was 39 years ago by Mount Sinai. And it was a Passover meal that was eaten with great haste and in fear, because they were fleeing from the Pharaoh and going into the unknown, into the desert. But they've crossed the Jordan River. They're in their home, their promised land, and they're eating the crops that land has produced. But what they don't realize is they're ready for another break. Because the morning after that Passover feast, the manna, which has been feeding them for the last 40 years, stops. And they now are just eating the produce of the land. A break. The old has ended. The old food is gone. And they're now eating the new food. The food that comes from this land. And similarly, in 2 Corinthians, we have Paul urging us to feel lost. Seems kind of strange and contradictory to want somebody to feel lost, but he's telling us to feel lost because we are new in Christ. Our old self is gone. It is diminishing, fading away to nothing. And we should feel that that is lost. And we should be turning to our new life and grabbing onto that. And he urges everybody to no longer regard people by the way of the world. No longer judge or measure people by the old ways. Because those old ways, the ways of the world, were with our old self. But we are now new people. And so there's new ways to look at people. So let that old ways be lost and gone. Grab on to the new way. And in our story in Luke, in the middle of this story, the son is at a breaking point. In the beginning of the story, the son tells his father that I want my inheritance. Now, in the Old Testament, he is the younger brother. The older brother in the family always gets double share of the inheritance. So since there's two of them, the younger son would have gotten a third of the estate. And as usual with inheritance, you get that when someone has passed. But his father is still standing there right next to him, and he's telling him, I want my inheritance. I would suspect that the father was feeling that the son was telling him, I want you dead. I would rather that you be dead so I can have my inheritance. And the father gives him the third of his estate. And the son then takes that wealth and goes off to a foreign land. And with many people who have just come into some wealth beyond what they've ever had before, it seems inexhaustible. But it's not. And the money runs out. And the son now has nothing and is hungry and hires himself out for the lowest of jobs of feeding the pigs. And this is where the break occurs. The son realizes that I am no longer my father's son. I have given that up. But my father treats his servants, his slaves, better than I am treated right now. So I will go back to him and ask if I can be one of his slaves. Lost is an interesting word. It's a short word. Simple word. But it has a whole lot of meanings. Kind of unexpected for such a short word. You'd expect a long word maybe to have lots of meanings. But lost, we could have lost something, like I said in the beginning. Misplaced it, don't know where it is anymore. Or maybe something is lost because it has wandered off or has been taken. And again, we no longer know where it is. Or maybe something is lost as in a lost cause. That there's no salvaging it anymore. It's gone. Or maybe things are lost as in I have lost my way and I don't know which way to go. Or maybe I feel lost, where I'm confused and I'm insecure. Or lost could be what we say when someone has passed on, as in there's a memorial to the lost crewman. Or lost may mean that something was here, but now has slipped away. That lost opportunity that is no longer with us. Or loss could be that something maybe I had once is now gone forever, such as my lost youth, or maybe my lost innocence. And it's a little disconcerting that there's quite so many ways we can be lost. So back in this story, the son was lost, but he was going home. He was going home to see if he could be this new thing after this break. No longer a son, but a slave. At least eat a little bit better. Now it's interesting. In this story, the son being found occurs in stages. Because at first, the son recognizes the break, that he is no longer the son, but that he could possibly walk into this new life and be a slave. But the father, from his perspective, the son is still lost. It's not until the son comes walking home that the father sees that he's found. It takes a couple steps here for the son to be found. And what does the father do when the son is found? He embraces him. He goes out and greets him. And the son squeezes in his apology and his insistence that he no longer be considered a son, but please accept me as a slave. And the father doesn't hear a bit of it. The father calls out for a robe and for a ring and brings sandals down, and let's have a celebration, for my lost son is found. And everything is good. Well, not quite everything, because there's the older son. And the older son hears the commotion and asks what's going on, and they'd say, your younger brother has come home. And the older brother is indignant about the celebration and refuses to come in. There's a difference between the father in this story. The lowercase father and the uppercase father. It is God. See, the lowercase father has a vision problem. He can only see so far. And the finding of his son, like I said, occurred in 2 steps. The son decided to become findable and came home. But the father didn't know he was found until he could see his son coming home. That's not the case with the capital F father. God, being omnipresent, gets to see all this right away. There's no stages of coming back and being found with God. When you turn, God knows it immediately. You are found in that instance. There's no wandering home and wondering, will you be accepted or will you be rejected? No, in that instance that you turn and you face God, you are found. Your lostness is gone. God works in this strange way, always finding us, always calling out to us. We may think that we are lost, but that's just because we have turned away and not faced God. We've turned away and squandered the wealth that God has given us by walking into the darkness. But as soon as we turn around and face the light, we are again found. God finds us. Not just once. Every time we turn around, we go from being lost to being found. Now, this is a parable that Jesus is teaching. It's a teaching moment for Christ. And parables are interesting because parables have many, many layers to them. And there are truths on every single layer. And as I said before, it's not like you have to get to the middle because that's the best truth. The truth on each and every layer is just as valid and good as the truth on any other layer. But it is a parable. Jesus didn't know a man who had 2 sons, and one of them took the inheritance and went off and squandered it. This is a teaching moment. And maybe on one level of this parable, there is something to be said to parents about how you deal with children, particularly children who may have wandered off and now have come back. Children who have squandered something of yours or of theirs. How do we deal with them? But on another level, on some other levels here, this parable is not about a small F father, but about a capital F father, and how that father chooses to deal with us. This parable is about a father who doesn't care what has happened. Doesn't care what you've squandered. Doesn't care about the mistakes that you might have made. About a father that wants nothing but to be in relationship with you and welcomes you back always. There's no need to worry about rejection. You're always welcome home. On some levels, this parable is about a father who sees all and knows the instant that you've turned around. And in that moment, you were found. On some levels, this parable is about the fact that we are given such great gifts. We're lavished with gifts by our Father, and sometimes we blow it. But there are always more gifts to be received. This parable is about a father who doesn't wait for us to turn around, but who is constantly there seeking us out, like the father, the lowercase father in this parable that went out to greet first the son that comes back on the road, and then went out to the son standing in the field who refused to come into the party. God reaches out to us first. And though he never forces us, but there are nudges, there are hints, there are coincidences that may help us turn around from the dark and again face the light. So this is a parable that Jesus teaches by. Many layers, many truths. And what are those truths that we pick up out of this? Paul says, once you were in Christ, your old life is gone and a new life has begun. So how has this parable formed our new life? Have we picked things up out of this parable that change how we behave, how we think, how we believe, what we do? Does this parable lead us in some way to maybe be more like the Father in this parable? Finding those who are lost. Over the last 4 years in Syria, there have been 4.8 million people who have become refugees. If you've seen the pictures of Syria, the cities many of them are torn apart with war. And even if there wasn't a danger to live there anymore, how could you go about your business? And how could you live in this thing when buildings have been destroyed, when there's no trade anymore? So people have left. They've made a break. They're leaving the old behind and seeking a new life. And the majority of these 4.8 million have ventured through Turkey or over the seas to Greece and to Italy, trying to get to a new place, trying to get to this new life. Many of them have died along the way. In September of this past year, our president said that we would resettle 10,000 of these refugees. We would act as the Father and bring them into our country. We would do this during the fiscal year 2016, which began in October of 2015 and runs through September of this year. And so far, we've brought in 841 people. In November, after his election, Prime Minister Trudeau in Canada pledged that he would bring in 25,000 refugees, resettle 25,000 refugees in Canada by the end of the year. He didn't make it. It took him 4 months instead of 2. But by the end of February, Canada had resettled 25,000 refugees. Now, Canada is a little bit smaller than the United States. Actually, Canada is a little bit smaller than California. Canada has 3.5 million people. California has 3.8. The United States has 316.5 million people. Canada has taken in a little bit more than 7/10 of their population in refugees. The United States has taken in a little less than 3/1,000,000% of our population in refugees. Had we resettled as many, percentage-wise, refugees as Canada did, in the last 5 months, we would have accepted 2,250,427 refugees. There's a judge here in town. He's one of the district court judges, Jim Reynolds. And the district court's judge sees all kinds of cases. Everything from joyous events like adoptions to less joyous events like divorces, or custody cases where parents may be taken away from their children due to neglect or abuse. And of course, as a judge, he sees all kinds of crimes. So all kinds of criminals are brought before him. And he says that some of these criminals are truly scary people. People that he would not like his family to encounter out on the street. People that bother him just sitting there looking at him, with him on one side of a bench and them on the other side. And yes, these people get put away. But he says that's a very small minority of the people he sees. He can count the number of people that he has seen in his judgeship that scared him like this. He says the vast majority of the people who come before him because they've broken a law are just lost. They've made one or a series of bad decisions that have landed them there in court in front of him because ultimately some law was broken. And he says, I don't want to send these people away. If they're here because they have a mental problem, I don't want to send them away to Warm Springs or someplace farther away, because that just breaks the connection, albeit with the connection with their family. And albeit maybe these are not the best of relationships, but they are relationships. And to send them away, far enough away where family or friends would have a hard time going and seeing them, further breaks connections and pushes them to being more lost. So one of the things that Jim has done is he's created the addiction court. And this is for people who have violated drug laws and have addiction problem. And as opposed to sending them away someplace, they go through an 18-month program where they come in weekly and report into the judge. They're monitored closely. They have counseling. If they don't have education, they're urged to get their GED and help that to give them some education. They're given job-seeking skills and training to have a job. Now, 50% of these people, once they graduate from this program, at some time go back to their addiction. But 50% of the people do not go back to their addiction. 50% of the people step into the new life that they are being called into, that's being laid out before them. They're leaving the old behind and adopting the new. They're taking that break from the old ways. And what Jim Reynolds says is one of the key things in this that we as a community need to do is we need to hire these felons. We need to associate with them. Because if we don't hire them, if we don't associate with them, it just pushes them back to the old life. It makes it that much harder to make the break and come into the new life. And so he urges us as a community to accept these people out of this program and help them with their new way. Family Promise. Many of you know about this program. It helps people who are homeless become homed. Unhomeless, is that a word? And through this program, they come in, and similarly, they get budgeting help. They get counseling. They get job interviewing skills. They are housed in churches around the community so they don't have to pay out rent for a while, and they can save up some money. They're fed while they're there. They're cared for. But probably the biggest thing that makes a difference in their lives is that people give up some of their time and cook meals for them. People give up some of their time and sit and talk with them and eat with them. People give up some of their time and spend the night there with them. And through this, the participants in Family Promise realize that they matter. They matter to these people who are giving of their time and of their talents to help them. These people realize that they are wanted, that they belong. There is a break here. They can leave the old homeless life behind and they can step into this new life where they are found, where they belong.